Thank you for joining me, Chez. I'm so happy to meet you. I can't wait to hear your
Same here.
story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here, Mitzi.
Let's dive in. Would you let us know who you are, what you're up to right now, so we can get a sense of what's going on in your life?
Yeah, no worries. My name is Chez and I'm 59 years old. I have 4 grown children and I'm currently unemployed. I recently got dismissed from a role, which was quite bizarre because the reason they gave me for the dismissal wasn't really true and correct. So I'm going through a process at the moment with a lawyer. So in the meantime, I'm just been traveling around and staying with a friend, waiting for a house that I have up on the East Coast in a place called Hervey Bay in Queensland in Australia. I've got tenants in that house and they're moving out mid-January. So then I can move in. And then when I get there, of course, I have to apply for a job and start life again.
What do you do professionally?
I was a registered nurse for 20 years. I was a general registered nurse who worked in cardiothoracic for 4 years. And then I moved into midwifery, became midwife. Then I became a psychiatric nurse. And then I did community child health nursing.
Wow.
So I was a nurse for 20 years and then I went from there into community services. I said, that's it, no more hospital nursing for me. And so I work in the community mainly, been doing a lot of Aboriginal very remote Aboriginal communities in the top end of Australia and working with people with mental illness, also child protection and early childhood programs.
Wow. That's
Lots
fascinating.
Very interesting. I've had a lot of jobs and I've got a lot of experience in the community services, which I've been doing now for 20 years as well. And that's my passion. I love it. I'm also a trainer and assessor. So occasionally I will pick up a gig to train people up in the industry because I feel like I need to share my knowledge. And that's really important to bring those people up who are starting at the bottom like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you have helped thousands of people over the years, it sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. In so many forms. It's just so rewarding. It's really rewarding work.
Yeah. And I always
Yeah.
think when people are like that, people are healers and helpers. There's a reason why. And sometimes it goes back to somewhere earlier on in their life, that's something that contributed to that. So let's talk about it. Let's go back to the very beginning. And if you could just tell us, where were you born? And maybe just what are some things you remember from very early on in your life, really super early, like your earliest memories as a very small child, if you can.
Wow. I was born in Adelaide in South Australia and I had a brother who is 4 years younger than myself, always wanted a sister. So I never got one. So I've
Aw.
got lots of soul sisters. But I guess my earliest memory would be, maybe when I was about 4. I lived with my parents who they got divorced when I was 8. So I don't have a lot of memories from early childhood. So I guess my earliest memory is that we lived across from a national park and my mum used to take me over there on a push bike and I remember being swooped by a magpie on my head. Yeah, so that was probably one memory. And then I pushed the neighbour's boy off the swing in the same house.
Oh my goodness.
So they're
Th-
my earliest memories.
That
Oh,
is
and one
funny.
more, there we had a lounge room wall and my grandfather was an artist and he painted a Egyptian pyramid on the whole of the lounge room wall. And I remember that to this day.
Wow. And so can you just tell us, in the US, what's a land room? Which room of the house is that?
A lounge room.
Oh, a lounge room. Okay, gotcha.
Yes, a
I'm
lounge room.
sorry.
That's my
So
slang
like,
English Australian accent.
no, that's great. So we might call that a living room or a family room here. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. So those are some interesting memories. I wonder how they all tie together. You have to think about that. So the magpie pushing the little boy off the swing. What was going on there? Were you mad at him?
No, I don't. I think it was an accident, but I do
Oh,
remember.
you remember it happened. You remember that it happened.
Yeah.
Wow. Was it
That's
upsetting?
bad.
Was it like an upsetting memory? Were you
Well, he cried.
okay?
Yes.
Interesting. So you might maybe that maybe that hurt your feelings and that's why you remember. I don't know. It's interesting.
Maybe I've never thought about it. Yeah,
Yeah. Or
and it just
why
came
that
to me
stuck with
now.
you.
Mm.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the pyramid. Wow. That's so there's some art in your family background, some creative people.
Yes, my grandfather was an artist, as I said, but he used to design labels for wine bottles.
Oh,
Yeah,
your
here in South
grandfather.
Australia.
So that would
And
have
this
been a very long time ago. Some old wine.
Yes,
Okay.
oh, a very long time ago. And both of his parents were artists, and
Oh,
they met in at art school and married in an art studio. But they painted like bowls of fruit and things like that. Very old fashioned style of painting. And on the other side, my other great grandmother was an artist as well.
so a
Yeah.
lot of very creative ancestors. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So then when you were young, you mentioned that your parents got divorced.
Yes.
And that happened when you were about 8. So you were in what grade then? Do you remember?
I think I was in grade 3, 2 or 3, something like that. Yeah. They didn't have a good relationship. There was a lot of fighting in the house, a lot of yelling. But I guess being so young, I didn't see it coming. And I remember coming home from school and my dad kneeling down on the kitchen floor with his great big men's hanky, handing it to me, telling me my mum wasn't coming home again, and gave me his hanky to console me. So I always use men's hankies, believe it or not.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's like a thing. And I've got this idea in my head to write a book one day because I have had an interesting life, and I just thought I'd call it Handkerchief Comfort.
Yeah. It's interesting that you have a symbol of comfort. You have a physical symbol of comfort
Mm.
from that moment.
Yeah, I do.
So your mom left the house.
Yes, she did. She had no choice. My dad made her leave. And my brother and I both lived with my dad, and my mum moved to Tasmania. And I did go over there for a short time when I was in grade 4 to live with her very briefly, but I missed my dad and my brother, and so she sent me back, which was good and bad. Like, I missed her, but at the time, I guess my dad could give me a better life than what she could give me, so I was very fortunate. My dad did give me a very good life. I never wanted for anything in my life.
Yeah. Did you maintain a relationship with your mom after that?
Yes, it was very difficult because my dad remarried very quickly and I had a stepmother. And of course, there was a very, very difficult relationships between them. So my mum moved back to the mainland, and I was only allowed to see her once a fortnight for dinner on a Friday night. And it was for about 3 hours. And that was it. And you can't really have a relationship with someone for 3 hours a fortnight. So as soon as I was able to drive, I basically took control of my own life and started seeing her more regularly and going and visiting her on weekends. But it was very
Mm.
difficult because of the tension between my stepmother and my dad, and trying to do it in sneaking around so they wouldn't find out. So I didn't feel guilty or didn't get in trouble. Yeah, it was
Wow.
difficult. And then when became an adult and had my own children, and would spend more time with her, but she died last year and we didn't speak for a number of years. We had a big falling out, and then she became quite unwell about 4 years before she died. So then I ended up back in her life and helping her. She was in a nursing home,
Oh, wow.
and ended up making amends with her, which was good before she passed.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh boy, that's quite something. Let's go back. So then she wasn't close to you after you got through the 4th grade and you were with your father and stepmother. And then you went through your teenage years in that way in your dad's house. And so can you tell us a little bit about the teenage years?
Yeah. Look, my parents were I'll refer to my stepmom as mum because I call her mum, but they were very strict. And I was definitely not the cool kid at school. I was a bit of a nerd. And which wasn't through choice. I don't think it was just my upbringing and parenting. And so I guess I had this thing I was very shy as well, believe it or not. I'm not shy now, but I was back then. Something snapped and I changed. But as a teenager, I was very involved with water skiing. My parents had a boat. We used to go water skiing every weekend, and I became very good at what I did and started competing. And then I learned I went to school with a guy called Bradley, who I ended up marrying, and he and I both had water skiing in common. So we ended up competing again, and I was in the state team for 6 years with him from my teen years right through to when I was about 25. And we got married at 19, very young.
Wow.
Mm,
Wow. So you're doing
and
competitive water skiing from the time you were
mm,
15 years old.
earlier. I started when I was 12. I was competing in tournament skiing. I did that for a couple of years and then I learned how to barefoot. So then I moved from tournament skiing into barefoot water skiing.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Was that how you were making money at that time? Like when you got a little bit older, old enough?
No, I didn't make money out of water skiing. I wish I
Ah,
could have. I actually got offered to become someone's protege and go to America. And my parents wouldn't let me, of course. So that didn't happen, but that's okay. And then I left school. I went to year 12, which is our highest level at school, and then became a nurse.
so you went to
Yeah.
school to become a nurse when you were out of,
Yes, I was 17 when I
yeah,
went nursing.
to
And
training.
back then, nursing you studied it in the hospital. So you did your on the job training, whereas now it's all university based. So I did all my training in a hospital. So I actually got paid for studying at the same time, which was awesome.
Oh, that's great. And you were
Yeah.
really young. So how long did it take to get your degree in nursing?
So it was a 3-year training and then 1 year to consolidate that, which we called the advanced nursing year. And so I did 4 years of that and then just working in a general hospital. And then from there, I ended up going and doing my midwifery training, which was a year in another hospital. And then I did my psychiatric training, which was 18 months in another hospital. This is over a period of time.
Okay.
And then I did a 6-month university course to become a child health nurse.
Wow. So what do you
Yeah.
think at 17 years old was the spark that made you want to be a nurse?
I never wanted to be a nurse, ever.
So why did you go to nursing school? Why did you go to the hospital to train?
When I left school, I never had a part-time job ever. A lot of kids worked at a grocery store or at Woolworths or somewhere. And I never got to do that because my parents, we went water skiing every weekend. So we were away all the time. So I couldn't actually hold down a job outside of school hours. So when I left school, my dad, back in the day, all jobs were advertised in the newspaper, not online like they are now. And I used to get up and he would have had the paper open on the kitchen table with these jobs circled, job, get out of bed and apply for a job. So I actually I just knew I needed to get a job. So I was desperate, but I really wanted to be a police officer. And yeah, that was my big thing. But I was too short because back then you had to be a certain height and I was 2 centimeters too short. And so I tried several times to get in. They said, no, no. And then finally I went to doctors and physios and chiropractors and gyms and said, how can I grow 2 centimeters? And then somebody in their wisdom told me that you're taller in the morning than you are in the evening because your vertebrae are stretched out from sleeping. And then by the end of the day, they sink back together again. So I turned up at the police station at 9 o'clock one morning and said, I'm here to be measured. I want to apply. And I passed. I actually passed the height test. I made it, just scraped in. So I went and it was a whole day of like being tested and everything. And I surpassed all of that. And then at the end of the day, there was a group of about 20 of us. And the man said, okay, that's it. We're done for the day, but we're just going to measure you again and weigh you. And I just, no, this isn't happening. And so when he measured everybody, he put everybody to one side of the room and he said, you stand over there. And so I did. And he came over to me. He said, how did you ever pass the height test? And so here I am pleading my case to him saying, but you're taller in the morning than you are in the afternoon. I gave him this spiel. And in the end, he gave in to me. He said, okay, get over there with the others. And that's how I got accepted. And but I had applied to do nursing as well. So I actually got accepted on both jobs on the same day. And then I had to make a decision. And in hindsight, I should have chosen the police force because things have changed now. But I chose nursing because at that time you could go back to nursing being part-time, have children, work casual, whereas the police force was very rigid and you could only work full-time. If you had children, you basically had to leave, where that's changed now. But you don't know these things are going to change and evolve when you're 17. Yeah, so
Wow.
that's how I became a nurse. And to be honest, I hated nursing so much after I think I was there for about maybe 3 months, and I'd applied for lots of banking jobs as well. And I remember coming home from work one day and my mum said to me, oh, the bank rang today and offered you a job, but I've told them you're a nurse now and, you've got a job, you don't need it. And because I never told them I didn't like it. And so
Oh,
I said, no, I want to work at the bank. So I rang them up and I said, you offered me a job today. Can I please still have the job? And they said, no, it's too late. We've given it to somebody else. So that was my path then. I was in it. I had to stay in it. And so I think that's why I did so many different nursing courses, was to try and find my passion and my niche. And I never found it in nursing ever.
wow. So you stuck with it.
I did for 20 years. I didn't hate it. I did enjoy it over time, but I did really love working with mental health. That was one of my favourite. Midwifery was boring as batshit. It was the same thing day in, day out. And like you deliver a few babies and help with breastfeeding, but you couldn't get a job in a labour ward because to get a job in labour ward, somebody had to basically die before a position became available. So it was very same thing day in, day out. And I like change and I got very quickly. Whereas mental health was very different. It was exciting. You never knew what was going to happen next. And my real mother, she said to me, she hated me working there in this big psychiatric hospital. And she used to say to me, I'm so worried about you. You can't be there with all those cuckoo people. And I'm there. If you can't beat them, join them. That's what I used to say.
I'll bet they taught you a lot.
Oh, they did. And look, I guess from there going into community services, I have now worked in areas with mental health in the community. So it's very different to working in a hospital. And I love it. I find it very interesting. And you think, why are these people ill and how can they get better? Very sad, but very fulfilling work. And I've seen people at the depths of despair and you think they're off with the fairies and come through the other end to living a purposeful life, working, living in community as everybody. It's incredible.
Transformation is possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So tell me about the husband when you were 19.
The husband. I've had 3.
Oh, the first husband.
So I went to school with Bradley and he was the cool kid of the school. Everybody wanted to date Bradley. He had the long blonde surfy hair and the blue eyes and very good looking. And we never dated at school. We were friends and he used to pick me up in this old car and drive me to school sometimes pick me up from the bus stop. And we were just friends and we water skied together. So then we got married and we were married for 5 years and I didn't ever want to marry him. I wanted to live with him, but my parents wouldn't let me. They said, no daughter of ours is going to live with some bloke. So I wanted to move out of home. So I was like, yep, okay, let's get married. So I did. And had I lived with him, I would have been home in a week.
Oh,
It was pretty awful, but I stuck it out for 5 years. and it was not a good 5 years. He was very abusive, very verbally abusive, and really what happened behind closed doors, nobody knew. Whereas out in public, we both were water skiers. We were very much enmeshed in a group of people that all did the same thing. We had this, it was almost like two lives. And I was nursing at the time and doing a lot of shift work and studying as well, on and off at different times. So we both, because of our sport, we exercised a lot. And so I would spend a lot of time at the pool, just so I didn't have to be at home. Yeah, a difficult 5 years. And then I decided that was it. I'm just not going to, I can't do this anymore. And I remember the day we got married, I got in the car and went to the church and I said, oh, getting married today, treat it like a party. And I'll get divorced one day when I can. And I remember that on my wedding day. That was, what a terrible thing to be thinking as you're going to the church.
You were listening to your intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. It was funny because I grew up with a guy called Michael. His mum and my mum were friends when we were both born and we were the same age. And so basically I knew him from the time I was born, and we went to kindergarten together, and then his parents moved house and my parents moved house as well. And we ended up going to the same school within a couple of months of each other in grade 2, I think it was. And same class, same school. And then we were in the same class right through until grade 8, which is our first year of high school here. And then his dad actually passed away. So his mum packed the family up and went to live in Seattle.
Oh.
And so my first year of nursing holidays, I decided to go to Seattle for a holiday to visit him because we'd been writing to each other all these years. And I always had this thing that I was going to marry him. And anyway, I got over there and spent 6 weeks holiday there. But Bradley, my first husband, he made me promise him that before I went, he said, when you get back, we're going to get engaged. And I said, yeah, that's okay. We'll get engaged, just to shut him up, basically. And not ever thinking that would have happened. And then when I came back from America, he basically said, that's it, we're getting married now. So that's how that all happened when I was 19. Yeah.
And then whatever happened with Michael?
Michael and I stayed in touch over the years, and then he came back to Australia to live. He's now a minister and pastors a church in Melbourne. He's married and has a couple of kids. And my second husband, he actually married us. He was our pastor who married us. And he also baptized my children, 2 of my children and myself.
Oh,
Yeah.
you weren't going to marry him, but he married you.
And that's what I always said that. And look, and I saw him only a couple of years ago. I was in Melbourne and I went to visit the church, and I met his wife, and she was lovely. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to meet you. I've heard so much about you, because I'm 59. So I've essentially known him for 59 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good segue into the second husband.
Yeah. So I haven't finished with the first.
Oh.
But he ended up marrying my childhood friend, who I've been friends with since I was about 10 years old. Yeah.
Someone in your same social?
Her sister was in our water skiing group. Jackie was not a skier, but apparently she was my bridesmaid. And I didn't know, but she was in love with him the whole time. And I said, we've spoken about it afterwards, I wished I'd known. We could have just swapped dresses.
Oh my gosh. You're too much. Wow. Things have a way of working out, don't they?
They do. And so where we lived, he moved out of the house. We'd built a house together and he moved out. And then I stayed in the house and I ended up buying the house off of him. But in that town, there was a small grocery store. And in that grocery store, there was a butcher shop. And I used to go to the butcher shop regularly. And there was a butcher there. And that was my next husband.
The butcher.
Who I met, the butcher. Yes. And he lived in the same town as it was a very small town. So we lived together for 4 years. Before we got married, he'd been married before as well. And I said I didn't ever want to get married again unless I had children. So we lived together for 4 years and then decided, yep, time to start a family. And so as soon as I got pregnant, he then married me when I was about 3 months pregnant, 4 months pregnant. Yeah, and then we had 4 children together, and we were married for 10 years. But he was very, and I was so young and naive back then. He was heavily involved with drugs, and I just thought once I had the children, I just didn't want my children to be involved in that scene. I didn't want them, I really wanted to protect them. So I left and took my children and moved to another state, basically to keep them safe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you ended up then divorcing.
Yep. So we'd bought a house together, but we'd never moved in because the people had wanted a long settlement for the house. In the meantime, I think it was about 6 months. So in that time, I separated from him, and I said to him that when the house becomes available, that I would move in with the children, and again worked. So I bought him out of the house, and he accepted that. And I lived there for a year, and then I met someone else, and I moved for another year closer to this other man that I'd met, but he wanted to marry me, and I said, no way. And then I moved interstate. My husband said, yep, you can move, because he really didn't have anything to do with the children. He only saw them once a fortnight, sorry. And I thought, why am I staying somewhere I don't really want to live for his convenience for once a fortnight? So when we moved to another state, he then would have them every year. He would come and take them for a holiday for a couple of weeks and spend a couple of weeks with them. And then every other year, the kids would go down and stay with him for about 4 to 6 weeks. So he would have a block of time rather than just bits and pieces here and there, which worked better. And it's worked better for, in the end for both parties, really.
Yeah, it sounds like that's better. It gives them the quality time.
That's right. Yeah. And my kids, they all have a relationship with him, and I don't interfere. And he and I speak. We didn't speak for many years, but I've just had my daughter's 30th birthday, and he went and I went, and he's civil, I'm civil. It doesn't matter anymore. I just feel like for myself, it takes more time, takes as much energy to stay angry. I can't be bothered with that. I'm not going to put energy into something that doesn't need to be.
Yeah, definitely. I know. You seem like a person who has very positive energy.
Yeah, I am. Yep.
So you want to create those situations in your life.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. My motto is, if you don't love it, don't do it.
Oh, yes. You have that on your Facebook. I wrote it down here.
On my
find it.
podcast, yeah.
You have it. Love life and it will love you back.
Yes, I do.
That's beautiful. So then by the time you had your 4 children, you must have been in your 30s, right?
Yes. I was 29 when I had my first one.
Okay.
And then I had 4 children in 5 years.
Oh, wow. So they're all very close together.
They are, which I planned. They were all planned because I really wanted to have them close together. And I guess, hoping that they would have good relationship with each other. And also I just figure if you've got one in nappies, you might as well have 2 in nappies.
Yes.
So why
That's
spread
true.
it out?
Get it all over with.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a good strategy. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. So then you were in your late 30s, you had 4 kids under 5. That's a lot. And you're still
Yes.
working as a nurse at that time?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Were you in the
Well,
psychiatric nursing yet at that point?
yes. And then went into community nursing with the
Mm.
child health. So when I had the 2 children, we had the first 2. My husband and I went around Australia. We travelled in a caravan, and we went for 9 months on a big holiday together. And that was probably really the only time that I didn't work, was that time that we travelled. And that was something that I always wanted to do. My husband had very severe arthritis, and always thought, and in his feet mainly, and his hands. So we always had this thing that one day he may end up in a wheelchair. So I said to him, I don't want to risk not being able to do this in our future life down the track. And if we're going to do this travel and be able to do all the walking and everything that we need to do to experience it, well, we need to go now while he was still able. So we did, and we travelled well together. And then when we came back, so it was unfolding, but then we had I got pregnant with the 3rd one on the trip, and then had the 4th one. But I knew when I got back it wasn't right, and it's not where I wanted to be. It wasn't where I wanted to stay. But as all relationships, I think it takes time to work it out and to
Mhm.
realize that if you want to leave, sometimes it takes time to get the courage to do that as well. So it took me probably 2 years to actually make that decision and then execute it. Yeah. Then when I did separate from him and we got divorced, I moved, like I said,
Mhm.
interstate. And then I was on my own for about 6 years. And then I met another man in Queensland where I had moved to. Yeah. And then he became my third husband.
What was he like?
He was fun. And I think that's what the attraction was because it was like having another child in the house, really. But he was always charismatic, but he
Mm.
was a gambler and an alcoholic. And so again, I didn't choose wisely and I did try and fix him, which of course I couldn't fix him. And our marriage was very short and it was okay. He just had a lot of issues and was costing me and my family a lot of money. He arrived on my doorstep with 2 bags of clothes and he went away with a lot more than that. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He went to rehab after I had filed for divorce and then asked me to withdraw the divorce before I went to court and asked me to give him 1 year to do this rehab, which I did, but he didn't complete the rehab. He did about 9 months and then he came back home and it was quite a test for my children. We had his children living with us as well for a short time. He had 2 boys that were younger than mine. So I had 6 children in the house plus him, and it was just all too much. And so when he came home from rehab, I just said that that's it. If you're not going to finish rehab, you got to go. And so we separated. In saying that, now he's met another lady, he's got another child with her, and we've done a whole forgiveness thing with each other, and we're still good friends. So that's not an issue. In fact, he rang me the other day for some advice about something, and there's no issue. Yeah.
It's very nice to be able to do that with someone that you've had a difficult relationship to be able to sometimes in order to have a good relationship, you can't be together.
That's right. And I always say to people in every relationship, no matter whether it's good or bad, when things do go bad, what was the gift? What did you get out of that relationship? And I have done that with every relationship that I've had. What is the gift? And with him, the gift was he took me to church and I became a Christian. So I think that was our reason for being together. And that was the
Mm.
gift he gave me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a nice gift. That's one you can carry with you forever.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
And what about your first husband and your second husband? What were their gifts?
Oh, was it? I can't remember. My second husband with my children,
Mhm.
definitely.
Yes.
And I think my first husband to be independent and have that wisdom to stand on my own 2 feet and really stop being a yes person. Like I was very much, people said, do this, do that. It was like I would just do it. I was a people pleaser. And I really did learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I became very strong from that relationship.
Yeah, they always give you something. And I always say the most difficult people in our lives are our greatest teachers.
Yeah, that's it. They are.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did I read somewhere that you lived in a tent for a period of
Yes, you did read
time?
correctly twice, actually.
What's that story?
So when I left my second husband with my children's father, we was because we'd sold our place and we were waiting to move into this other house. We were living in his dad's house and I decided to separate from him and he refused to move out of the house that we were
Mm.
staying in. He said, "No, this is my dad's house. It's my family home. I'm not going anywhere." And I said, "Okay, I'm leaving anyway." So I packed up the kids and for all good intentions, we went on a camping holiday and lived in a tent in a caravan park that was a tourist park, not somewhere where you can live in a tent. Anyway, I was there for a few weeks and the managers of the park realized that I was actually living there. So they evicted me. And then I had to pack up and move out. And so the kids went to their dad's for the weekend and I packed up everything. And then we didn't have anywhere to go. So I said to them, could I please just come? I'll pack up, move out, come back to the caravan park. I stayed there for another 2 weeks and I said, then I can move into my house. And they accepted that was okay. but the house settlement didn't go through. So then we ended up squatting in the garage of my new house because I couldn't get into the house. So we just broke into the garage. I broke into the house and used the bathroom, but we didn't move into the house. We didn't sleep in the house. We just slept in the garage and had all the kids' air beds lined up against the wall. And yeah, just another adventure for the kids. May tried to make fun of it, and but it was a test of a time, that's for sure.
Did you
And
eventually
then
get the house?
yeah, we'd bought the house, and the people had moved out, but they wouldn't let. I even asked to move in early and pay rent, and they said no. So after I finally got the keys to the house, the agent said to me, "I did see the washing on the line. I knew you were living there." And then when I moved to Hervey Bay, again, we lived in a tent for about 6 weeks when we first moved there because I just couldn't get a rental anywhere. The rentals were very few and far between. So, yeah, we made the front page of the paper. Someone came and did a story on me because I was sitting under the tent covering school books, and this man had told a reporter about me. So he came along and said, "Oh, I hear you're living in a tent with 4 children. Can I do a story on you?" So he did a story.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the
So
kids
that was
like that time?
Oh, look, they love it. We've always camped. So to them, it was just we were camping. It was no big deal for them, really, until it rained and rained and everything was wet. I think it rained for 3 or 4 days straight, and literally everything was wet, and it was a torrential rain. And I remember 5 o'clock that night, I got a phone call from the real estate agent. I couldn't even hear her on the phone. I had to go and sit in the car to even hear her talking to me because of the noise on the tarp on the tent. And she said to me, "You've got the house." I applied for a rental, and she said,
Mhm.
"You've got the house. You can move in tomorrow." And I just sat there and cried because I was like beyond at that stage. Everything was wet. I'd used every blanket, every towel to soak up. All the inside of the tent was just, it was saturated, and there was nothing more I could do.
Wow.
So I spent the next couple of days at the laundromat washing everything and drying everything. And then we moved into the house with our camping gear, and we lived in that house for about 4 months before I decided to get my furniture sent up from out of storage from another state, and to make it home because I still wasn't sure, are we in the right place? And yeah, it was the right place for us, and we stayed there for 9 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. So your kids then they must have started moving out one by one, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's go into your 40s and into your 50s.
So I moved to Hervey Bay. I turned 40 that very year
Mhm.
actually. And I got a job, and that was it. I never went back to nursing ever again. So I stopped nursing when I was 40, and I went into the community service sector and got an awesome job and worked in Hervey Bay as a family support worker. That's how I started off,
Okay.
and working with people with having crisis in their life, basically. So everything I'd learned in my lifetime in that 40 years really did help me to help other people.
Yeah.
And so the kids finished high school in Hervey Bay, and then my 2 eldest ones moved to Brisbane to go to university because there was no university in Hervey Bay at that stage. And then I moved down to the Gold Coast to support my husband during rehab. And then from there, because we'd separated, I ended up moving to Broome, which is way over the other side of Australia on the West Coast. And I just decided one day, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, where are we going to go? I said to the kids, how about we go to Broome to live? It was somewhere that I'd visited, but I wanted to go back and spend more time there. And so I started packing up boxes of gear, and every box that I thought we should take to Broome, I put Broome on the box. And I manifested that. And then I started looking for a job, and I found a job, and I said, that's it. I'm claiming that job as mine, got the job and moved.
With
So
2 kids.
no, with only one came with me, my youngest. And
Okay.
my my third child, she did not want to come. And so she had a friend who was moving from, or had moved from Australia to New Zealand. So her family had offered for her to go over there and live with them in New Zealand and go to school there with her daughter and she was part of their family. And so I agreed to that. I didn't like, but I agreed to it at the time. But that didn't really work out. It lasted for about 6 months, and then she came back to me. And then I ended up leaving that job and going back to Hervey Bay to live, because I thought, no, it's better to put her back in her old school and have her old friends around her and give her some stability, because she was really struggling. So we moved back again. Yeah.
Oh my. Wow.
And we've moved a lot.
You
Yeah.
have moved a lot. What do you think that's been about?
I don't know. I think when I left my husband and moved to Hervey Bay, like, I always wanted to live in Queensland, but it's just been a bit of a, oh, what do you call that? Just a chain reaction, really, because when I went back there, actually, I then was struggling to get a job. So I could get a job back in Western Australia, but in Perth. So we ended up moving a year later. We moved to Perth. I took 2 young ones with me. The 2 older ones, they were at uni. They were settled. They were fine. So I took them with me, and we went to Perth to live. And the same one who had gone to New Zealand, can be very difficult at times, and still is, and she's now 25. So what happened was, my youngest one there was an issue that had happened at the school over there. So she decided she was not going to go back to that school. She refused. So she then wanted to go and live with her dad in Adelaide. So I said, okay, no worries, you can go and live with him. So she did. And then the one that had gone to New Zealand, she decided that, no, I don't want to live here with you. I want to be with my sister. So she went over for the Christmas holidays for her time to spend with him, and then decided not to come back to me. So I had no children at that stage, and the 2 of them were living with their dad. But it didn't last very long. My youngest one missed me, and she ended up coming back. And then, yeah, her and I stayed together for a bit longer, and then she ended up going back to Adelaide again and living with an auntie and uncle, because she got a carpentry apprenticeship
Oh.
with an uncle that was a builder. So she went over there and she did that for a short time as well. So then from Perth, I met somebody in Perth. And so I moved then to Broome, and then moved to Darwin. And then my youngest daughter came up and lived with me in Darwin. And then that kick-started me working out in Aboriginal communities.
So that is
Yeah.
that must be very interesting and rewarding work. I don't know really much about
Yeah.
the Aboriginal culture at all, other than photographs. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So remote Aboriginal communities are very remote. There's nothing, they might be anywhere from a couple of hundred people living in a community to maybe 2.5 to 3,000 people. So out in a community, there is not very much services for these people. There's a small shop that is very expensive because of the cost of food getting there, but also I think a lot of them are being exploited. There might be a childcare centre, there's a school, there might be a council service, there might be a Centrelink service, which is a government benefits service, and that's about it, and a council. So very limited. It's very hot. And where I was working mostly, I went up north, so it was very hot. You can anywhere 40 to 50 degrees every day on a daily basis. Red hot, dusty dirt, a lot of crocodiles, so you can't go swimming in the rivers or the what do they call them, lagoons
Okay.
up there. Yeah. So the billabongs. Yeah, so it's very interesting because Aboriginal people, they either accept you or they don't. And you have to really take your time to get to know these people, or else they will not accept you at all. And I guess for me, I was always had the ability to build rapport very quickly with the women that I worked with. And when you're accepted, when they say, call me auntie, or they'll call you sister, or they'll give you a skin name, it's really meaningful and it's very special. And to build those relationships and have that trust is really just so important.
So what's a skin name?
In an Aboriginal community, they have skin names for different mobs. That's what they call them. They call them Aboriginal mobs. Yeah, so given a skin name means you're accepted into their community as part of one of them.
So a name that would be like a traditional Aboriginal name.
Yes, but not like a Jane or a Susan or a Karen type name. It's like my skin name was Shin, I think it was. So I've written it down somewhere, but Actually, it's a color. It's an orange color. But yeah, it was very special, the fact
Hmm.
that I've given that name. Yeah.
Yes. How did you work with them to get that rapport?
Yeah, I worked in different areas, in different sectors. So I've worked in child protection, which was very difficult. And I was a team leader. So I had a team under me. So we would have to work with people who were at risk of losing their children into the child protection system. So I guess working with child protection very closely, and I get, before I got there, things were not good in the community with the child protection workers. So I said to them, we need to work together. So we would go on home visit the families together so they could see that we were there together as a team and supporting each other, so that trying to explain to them, we're not here to take your children away. We want to support you and help you and teach you in the areas that you're struggling with to make it right, make it better so that the children aren't taken away. And through that process and being consistent was the main thing. You can't go there and see them once a month. We had to go regularly and just sit and talk and listen to them without telling them what to do and how to do it. Listen to them and listen to their side of the story and try and work it in their cultural way
Mm.
on making it safe for them culturally, but acceptable in our world.
Sounds
Then,
like we could learn a lot from that, from
yeah,
accepting one another's differences and figuring out how to make that work in the
yeah, that's
modern
it.
world.
Yeah. And also I worked in one community in mental health, and it was around trying to improve mental health in general. So I worked with a group of women who were struggling with mental health. They may have had depression, they might have been suicidal, just not coping in their life, in their family, because they have very small houses, and these houses might have 3 bedrooms, and they might have 30 to 40 people living in these houses. And there's one family per bedroom. So you might have a mother and a father and a sister and 5 kids in one bedroom sort of thing. It's really difficult. Then you've got people living on the veranda and people living in the
Mm.
kitchen area, and there's no lounge room or living room. So their living circumstances are very grim,
Mm.
really. And because of the system here in Australia with getting money from the government, a lot of those people can't navigate that system. So then they don't apply for the system and
Mm.
they've got no money. So you might have 20 people in a house, but only 5 of those people actually getting government benefits. So therefore the money buying food is spread very thin. And because of their culture, they all look after each other and there's no questions asked. It's, here's my key card, take it, go buy whatever you want. The key card comes back and it's empty. And then there's no money for food. So then someone else gives them a key card to go and buy food. And so it's this big cycle. It goes round and round in circles because they just want to give and share, and that's how it works. So I had a group of women who were mentally unwell, but knowing in the community they weren't well. So I used to take them out. We call it on country, which is maybe half an hour's drive to a special place that was special for them. And we would go out once a week, and I'd take a big mat and would cook up a big stew out on the campfire there. And the ladies would make damper in the
Mm.
sand and put it on a fire. And they would just tell stories, and they would talk to me and tell me stories about their culture and about their life. And they were the happiest ever when we were out on country. They were just came alive. They would be fishing and happy, and it just made such a big difference. And when I left there was one lady called Joy, and her sister made me this big grass mat out of pandanus weave with pandanus leaves. And she gave me this mat, and I still have it. I'll never get rid of it. And in the middle, it had a really dark patch in the middle of this mat and a white area as well. And her sister said to me, "That's you and Joy in the middle, light and dark." And she said, "And this mat is you and her going on a journey together and making her better." And the mat got bigger and bigger. And so she said to me, "And now this is Joy being well. You made her
Mm.
better." And I didn't make her better at all, but it just helped in that process. So when she gave me that, I cried, and it was just so special because I didn't realize what an impact it had been to actually take this lady out on country. Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful. So you just
Mm.
provided circumstances for her healing.
Yes, that's right. And then I had a friend who worked at the women's centre with the art ladies. So her and I had this troopy vehicle. We had one each. So we joined forces and decided to take both our lots of ladies together. And the ladies didn't speak to each other. And we couldn't work out why, because they're in the same community. So they would go out there and one lot of ladies would sit on one lot of mat and another lady on the other mats. And we couldn't work it out. And they wouldn't talk to each other. Anyway, we just kept doing it. We were consistent and week by week. And we could see these ladies coming together and getting closer and closer and started communicating with each other. And what we found out was the art ladies knew that my ladies had mental illness. So they would say to me, oh, they're cuckoo. And I'm like, but hang on a minute, they're not cuckoo. They're just like you. They're everyday ladies like you and I. Anyway, it turned out over the time, on occasion, we would go and pick them up in the car and some of my ladies wouldn't come. And then the ladies were asking, oh, where's today? Where's? So, oh, no, she's not coming today. And they were disappointed. Anyway, we got my ladies to go to the art centre to do some art. And they were welcomed and then they just joined forces. And it was just this amazing coming together of these two group of women that really didn't understand each other at all. And it was about total acceptance. And then a couple of years after that, they have these cultural events once a year where people can display their wares and they do the cultural dancing and everything. And it's a big festival. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I went to the festival and these ladies from this community were there, the art ladies. And there was one of my ladies who had mental health. She was there and she was actually working with them and she was at the festival. And it just made me so happy to see she was actually still with them and they all remembered me. And it was just, the best. Just to see the positive outcome that had actually come out of us persevering with it.
And all through the arts.
Yeah, absolutely. Art and being on country is the key.
Nature and the arts. Very, very common healing mechanisms there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow. I love that. So now I know that you are doing this podcast called the Midlife Motivators.
Yes.
And so tell us about this.
Yes, so I did a life coaching course about, 4 or 5 years ago, and I met Fiona. Fiona was in New Zealand or still is in New Zealand. And I did this course and there was 100 women doing the life coaching course at the time. And we were basically matched computer-wise on what we liked and what we didn't like and our interests. And I was matched up with Fiona and they said, this is your buddy. You're going to be coaching her. She's going to be coaching you. And I actually complained. I said, no, I don't want somebody in another country because of the time difference. It was just pretty difficult because I was working and it was just hard. And anyway, they said, too bad, so sad. You've got her. So Fiona and I joined forces and did our coaching together and we became really good friends. And I have never met her in person, only by Zoom. And we speak on probably most days, if not every other day. And then because we've just got this really strong friendship, one day she just said to me, how about we do a podcast together? And I'm not a podcaster. I don't listen to podcasts. I'm not really into it. I'm like, what is it? What do we do? And so she said, well, let's try it and see. So we downloaded the app and we had a few plays and we said, okay, so then let's do this. How do we go about it? It's just evolved. We've grown. We've definitely improved since our first ones because we really didn't know what we were doing at all. And it's just talking about midlife because midlife women often go through a lot of struggles and don't have anyone to talk about their struggles with, or they might think that they're alone in that journey. And Fiona and I just thought, we're both life coaches. I think we've got something to offer. Let's have some of those discussions and put it out there for other women to know that they're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. It's interesting when you get to this stage of life. I'm 56, you're 59, and it is a turning point. It is. It's a new stage of life. That's how I think of it. People talk about the midlife crisis. I don't see it as a crisis at all. It's just a new part of life. It's a different leg of the journey.
Yep.
And
Oh,
there
for
are
sure.
new things to navigate. And so having a place where you can discuss the different things that come up for people at this stage of their lives is a beautiful thing. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah. Look, we've had a lot of feedback, mostly positive. There was a few people who said to me on a personal level, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And, oh, I'm not sure about this. And they were like the naysayers. And so I was ready to call it quits. And I rang Fiona and I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I can't do it. It's too hard. And then I told my daughter, one of my daughters, and she's one of my greatest followers, I guess. And she's only 25. So she said, no, Mum, you are not quitting. You are not. She said, forget about the naysayers. Do what you have to do. She thinks it's great. And she said, you've got to keep going. You're only going to get better with time. So I rang Fiona. I said, okay, I'm not allowed to quit. My daughter said. So we kept going. And I think I got my motivation back to keep going. And I think I felt that it was a bit heavy and I wanted to make it a bit more lighthearted. So trying to do that as well. There's been some interesting topics and we've had interesting people on our show. So I've really enjoyed it and I love working with Fiona. She is wonderful. She's such a beautiful soul. And we're polar opposites, I think, in our everyday lives.
That's funny.
Other than the fact that we're both life coaches.
That is funny. We're going to have the link to your podcast in the show notes so people will be able to check it out if they want to listen to it.
Thank you.
And I agree. I have met Fiona. And so for my listeners, there is also a life stories podcast with Fiona. You can check that out as well.
Yes.
But I love that you're doing that. So how do you see midlife? What's your vision of what that is for people?
Oh, wow. I think it's a time of exploration and fun. And I've got to the point in my life, I really don't care what people think of me. I think it's a time to let go of old beliefs and stop worrying about what people say, what people think. And here I am was worrying about the naysayers on my podcast. It's just time to be you because there's not much time left. Like I'm 50% over my half of my lifetime now. I just think I want to enjoy the second half of my life and make the absolute most of every day. And so that's what I try and do. And I really try and stay positive. I'm not a negative person and trying to do things that I love to do. And part of that for me is being creative. So the podcast is one of those things.
Yeah, that's your way of being creative in a family of creatives. Interesting. You don't paint, or do you?
No, I don't paint. I didn't get that gift, but I love photography. So I also have a photography page. Yes.
That's right. Yes. I have seen your beautiful photography.
Yeah. I'm just an amateur, but because of where I've been working, I've had the opportunity to photograph some of the most amazing scenery and landscapes. And so I've called myself off the grid photography with Chez. So I do have a Facebook page for that and an Instagram page.
A lot of beautiful things to see in Australia. I love looking at foreign lands because for me, it's completely different from what my environment looks like. And it's beautiful to see it. I love that, that you're doing that too. So if you look back, what do you think was the best decade of your life?
Oh, wow. Best decade.
It's to come.
Maybe that's right. It could be. Oh, look, I think this last decade from 50 onwards, doing career-wise, absolutely this has been the best because I'm working in the communities for the last, how long have I been out there now? About 7 or 8 years. I have experienced things that most people don't get to experience. And that has been so rewarding for me. So I guess for my career, that has been the best. I'm now moving into a new area. So for my next decade, I'm changing my career path now and I'm not going remote anymore. And once I get settled with my house, I'm hoping to start a business, which will be called Life by Design. Create your own life, your own world, really.
Yes.
And
great title.
Yeah. The Life by Design with Chez. And my idea is to go and transform people's homes declutter, organize, and help people stage their houses ready for sale.
Wow.
Yeah.
So another creative field,
Yeah.
putting your own spin on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love doing it. It's something I love to do for myself. And often every time I have a house, people compliment me on how my house looks. And it's just something I love to do. I love decorating. And so I thought, no, I'm going to try step out of my comfort zone and
Mhm.
try something different.
Try something new, following your heart.
Yeah.
You seem to be very good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I try.
Mm.
It takes work. And people say, how do you stay so positive? How do you do this? I would love your life and I love what you do. It's about choice. We all have choice. And I'm choosing that.
That's interesting because I would have described you as a free spirit. But being a free spirit doesn't mean that you're just blowing in the wind.
No. And I am a free spirit, really. But it is about choice. And I could choose to sit and stop and do nothing and read a book all day and do the 9 to 5 job like everyone else does. But I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Why stop?
That's right. And I don't intend to.
Exactly. Me neither. So if you look back over this really intrepid and beautiful life that you've had, what would you say are the biggest points of gratitude, the biggest blessings of your life?
Wow. My first one would be my children. I have 3 girls and 1 boy, and I have a really good relationship with all of them. So I'm really blessed with my children, and I know that they have learnt from me a lot. And my oldest daughter in particular, she makes comments every time she writes me a birthday card or a Christmas card. Mum, you're my biggest inspiration. You've taught me so much. So that's really nice. I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of them, of who they've become, because they're very much their own people and they're the rule breakers like me.
You get to make your own rules in life, right?
That's it. Exactly. And the other blessing, I've had a career that has expanded over so many different fields and different areas. And I'm really grateful for that I've had an interesting work life. I never chose to work in a bank or never got to work in a bank like I was going to choose. And I'm so grateful for that because I think that would have been very boring.
Yeah, you didn't want to go into nursing, but somebody up there was saying, no, you're going to be a nurse.
Absolutely. And look where it's led me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting to go back over those things that you didn't think were good decisions at the time that actually turned out to be the best thing for you?
Absolutely.
Yep.
God has a plan for us all the
Mhm.
way. And I look at my life and I think about if I was to map it out and think about every stage that I've gone from step to step, it's like a big jigsaw puzzle and it's all playing out and piece by piece, it's just all fitting in beautifully.
Yeah. I love that metaphor, especially since you're a photographer. It's- the picture is all coming together.
It is. Absolutely.
And so what about the lessons? What are the greatest think about your greatest teachers. What are like we said those difficult people can be the biggest teachers and maybe you've gotten some lessons from difficult things and also from the wonderful things. What would you say are your biggest lessons?
Yeah, I think lessons over time, I guess from myself becoming a Christian, my lesson is not to, everyone has a story. And everyone has a reason around why they behave the way they do or why they say what they say. And some of that is from trauma, from their own childhood. And we don't know what those people's stories are. And I think a big lesson for me is about forgiveness because I think people don't want to be nasty or mean. In general, everybody wants to be a good person. But for those people who are not so kind, sometimes there's something hidden away of why they do behave the way they do. So I just think for me, I have to forgive people. If there's someone that's not treating me well or has said something to upset me, I just have to let it go. And I think, you know what? It's actually not about me. It says more about them. So that's my lesson is forgiveness.
Yeah,
Mm,
that's the big thing. I think that's the overarching lesson for us all. Yeah.
for sure.
When you think about this world, what do you think is the most important thing?
Love. I think we have to love each other and be kind and be generous, I think, to people and just give. And giving's not about getting something back. It's about giving from the heart and doing something because you want to, and don't begrudge people because you're giving them something. I feel like I get a lot of pleasure from giving to other people, whether it's my time, whether it's a gift, whether it's doing something for them. I really enjoy that.
And so you're going to be moving into a new house. How long do you think you'll stay?
How long's a piece of string?
I'm stealing that. That is good.
Look, to be honest, I don't actually know. I bought this house a couple of years ago. I've never lived in it. I bought it as an investment property and I've had tenants in it. They're moving out in January. And because of the circumstances of my job at the moment, I've just decided, yep, okay, I'll go back there. I'll set the house up. I'll probably Airbnb the spare room. If I was to move out, I would probably Airbnb the whole house and just keep it as a holiday house and an Airbnb. But I really don't know how long I'll actually stay. I'm actually
teasing
staying
you, really. I don't think it matters. I think you'll be called to be where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's it. I'm staying with a friend at the moment he's actually the love of my life. And it's not my decision. It has to be his decision on whether we are to be together or not. Well, actually, God's decision. Look, I'm just praying that when I leave here, that I can come back one day.
There may be a part 2 to this story.
It could be. Yeah, my home is in his arms. So wherever he is, where I feel like I belong, but that's for me. That's my thing. It may not be for him. We're waiting on that chapter.
Suspense.
True.
Oh my goodness. Wow. This has been a beautiful conversation, Chez. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and for sharing all of the different ups and downs of your life. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and I've really enjoyed it. And you've actually made me stop and think and reflect on my past as well. And hopefully people enjoy listening to my story.
I know they will.
Yeah, great.
So that's funny that you say that, because a lot of people say that to me. They say afterwards that they started thinking about something or something comes up. I started telling people at the end, don't be surprised if something comes up for you over the next couple of days.
Yeah, okay.
Just go with it. Maybe there's something that you'll think about as a result of the conversation, because it's something people don't normally do, is go through their life story on a timeline, and it definitely makes you think.
Yeah, it does. But I think it's a good process.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great
Because
process.
I'm such an open person anyway, I'm very self-aware of my life and how it's turned out.
It's beautiful. And you're a beautiful person. And I'm so happy to have met you.
Yeah, same. And thank you again. I hope you're happy with what I said and how it
I
went.
am. It's perfect.